So one thing, Marco, and this is something that I brought up a lot in the offseason. It's something I wanted to see if this gets fixed. The 49ers are terrible at scoring in the first half. Like, for some reason, they just don't put up points. Last season, it felt like the only time they were putting up points was in the last 2 to 4 minutes of the second quarter when it was like 2 minute drill, right? When it isn't scripted plays and it's just like, just instinct plays, things like that. I think Kyle Shanahan is a genius. I think he scripts up amazing plays. But there is this narrative that's starting to grow that he might not be the best at decision making and play calling when his plan A isn't working, right? So when, for example, Elijah Mitchell went down, all of a sudden now there wasn't a plan B that was very effective to be able to do that. So is the narrative that maybe Kyle Shanahan should give up play calling duties something that is real, or is this fake news as well?
I think it's fake news in terms of who do you really have to call the plays on the coaching staff? Like realistically, those guys have left, right? Mike
Mhm.
McDaniel, LaFleur left with Robert Sala, so like those guys have left the building that he
Right.
could actually trust to call the plays. So I
Anthony
think,
Lynn is also somebody who was questionable with his play calling decisions, right?
yeah. So like if you're one of the best game planners or guys that draws up the X's and O's, I think Kyle Shanahan has actually proven that he's a good play caller. Now, he's proven also at the same time to have a tendency to go away from things that are working. He tends to, hey, if this is working, well, they're going to eventually change something up. So he changes before they change their defensive looks, and then it puts them in bad situations. So I think Kyle Shanahan should be the play caller. I think he does a hell of a job, especially because when Kyle was rolling, there's a nickname that Kyle had for how good he calls the plays. People call him disrespectful Kyle for a reason, right? Like that nickname that he was given by fans in 2019 when he was calling plays perfectly for Jimmy Garoppolo in that 2019 offense was phenomenal. One of the best offensive seasons I've ever seen from a 49ers perspective since I was born, right? Like I haven't seen many offensive teams like that. I only expect him to continue to grow with Trey Lance. We got to remember this is only his first game with Trey Lance as actually being his official starter, and it was in the worst conditions he could possibly ask for. But we did see him draw up two nice throws, right? Two wide open throws, a wide open vertical route and a wide open crossing route, and both of them were big plays, a 40-yarder and a 30-yarder. So I think with dry weather, with better weather, we're going to see a much better offense. I think Kyle's going to be a way better play caller as the season goes on with Trey Lance as his quarterback. So I don't think it's one of those ones where fans should worry yet, especially when you're that high of an octane offense. If we look at Kyle's um, offenses in the past, he always gets the best from his offense from the personnel he has. If we look at him with Ryan and Julio Jones, they put up MVP like season. They went to the Super Bowl. He made Jimmy Garoppolo a much better quarterback than he was Matt Schaub at the time. He got the best out of.
Bless you.
Oh, jeez. Thank you.
Dab on
He
him,
got the
baby. Dab on him.
he got the best out of Johnny Manziel and what's his name, Brian Hoyer at a time. Like we're like you can't do everything to be perfect, and I think that's something that he understands, and I think that's why he'll never give up the play calling. I think there's also an ego issue though. Like I don't know if you see it or you could talk about it, but do you think it's also an ego issue that hey, if I'm the best offensive mind in the game, why am I having someone else call the plays?
I do think he has like a control thing where he needs to be in control. I feel like he's actually gotten a lot more, a lot less egotistical. Like I feel like he's taking more input from others than he has in the past. So I do see him getting better at that. But I do think he still has that like little control thing where he doesn't want to give up too much control. But I do want to, because some of the guys, I think this, push the button for some guys that maybe are seeing similar things to me. Harold Morrell says, season after season, it's an ongoing issue. 49ers defense get interceptions, and the offense cannot convert turnovers to points. And this is something that I'm talking about. There's another comment here. Kyle hasn't trusted a QB since he had Ryan 2016. He's trying to make up for QB deficiencies, and Lance is a first-year starter. This is my question for you, Marco. You know, Kyle Shanahan is an offensive genius. I agree with that. But there is something to be said that every single year he's been here as a 49ers head coach, it's the defense that's had to bail this team out consistently, right? If the defense wasn't as good as it was, there's very few moments that you could pick to where the offense is the reason why this team has won games. Off the top of my head, I could think of, the New Orleans game where Jimmy went off, right? There's one game where the offense really uh, rose to the occasion when the defense was just letting Drew Brees score all of those points. But to be an offensive genius, like you look at a guy like Andy Reid, Andy Reid's defenses aren't better than the offenses he puts up every year. And you could talk about that at Kansas City. You could talk about that when he was with the Eagles, right? But that isn't something that you could say for Kyle Shanahan. And we're in year 6 now, Marco. So in year 6, if you still don't have an offense that at least is equal to the defense, because look, the defense just has studs all over the place, and so obviously the defense is going to be good. But what do you make for the fact that this offense seems inept compared to how good this defense is?
So if we go back to, there's some times where a lot of people will criticize like certain teams or whatever, but if we go back to, I believe it was the 2019 season, right? The 49ers offense actually averaged 29 points a game. They were averaging 30 points a game, whether that's the defense giving them the ball back, but they were putting up points, right? And I think that was more so Kyle in his bag at the time because 2017, Kyle Shanahan, I believe, was hired, right? 2017
Mm-hmm.
hired. 2018, their offense really doesn't have an identity.
Jimmy
Because they
gets
don't have a
injured,
quarterback.
right?
Jimmy gets
Yeah,
injured. So they don't really have an identity, and then you're having to play CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins, which if any team you could give Andy Reid those two quarterbacks, he is not
right,
putting up points. Like you could
exactly.
you know what I mean? So he's not going to put up the point. But then 2019, Kyle Shanahan gets a Jimmy Garoppolo who is still at the time the NFL had not figured him out yet because there wasn't tape on him. There was only 5 games, but those game tapes really weren't scripted. Like they were literally just him only knowing half the playbook. So the NFL teams didn't get to react, but he put up 30 points. It was like 29.6. He was the third highest scoring offense in the NFL behind Baltimore and Kansas City. And then last year, injuries happened. Jimmy Garoppolo isn't fully healthy. So if you look at last year, which was 2021,
I
the
think they're around
offense struggled. They
24
were around
points.
24
Yeah.
point something or 25. So
Mm-hmm.
they put up that's pretty solid number for a team that had a quarterback that was injured all season. That was like 15. I think that's like they were ranked 15th offense in total points per game. So I don't think it's an issue of Kyle Shanahan putting points on the board. I think the issue is Kyle Shanahan understanding you cannot put too many points on a team, right? Like that's his issue. He gets so caught up in this situation where he goes, okay, I'm up 31-10, but not understanding at the NFL things change like this, right? Like a touchdown interception, that team is back in the game. So he needs to. I think his problem is understanding you got to keep your foot on the gas at all times. But then at the same time, he gets criticized for doing that because when he kept his foot on the gas in previous Super Bowls, previous stuff like that, a sack happens. Next thing you know, he's relying on his quarterback to execute, right? You know not to take a sack. You're an NFL quarterback. Quarterback doesn't throw it away. He takes a sack. Now, Kyle gets blamed for that, right? So that's the thing that what sucks for Kyle is he gets this blame game where a lot of people were like, "Oh, Kyle, you suck. You called in the Super Bowl. You blew the Super Bowl in Atlanta." And the same thing with the 49ers when they were up 20-10. Well, no, he's keeping his foot on the gas because he knows the other teams can score fast.
Right.
And next thing you know, his quarterback is not executing. His quarterback is going to the line of scrimmage, killing the play, going to the next play that he gave him. So that is not on Kyle. That's now on the quarterback, right? So I think it's more so having that trust and having the confidence in a quarterback. And the reason why we haven't seen Kyle's offense go crazy or go bananas. But we did see it in 2019. 2020, obviously, they took a little hit on points per game because of the injuries to the quarterbacks. But they've been pretty solid in terms of averaging points. I wouldn't call like wave the white flag for Kyle Shanahan to be done as a play caller just yet. Like let's see him cook with Trey Lance for a little bit, and then people are gonna be like, okay, now we get why Kyle Shanahan got a quarterback like this. Now we understand why Kyle wasn't able to put up as many points in the past because he did it in 2019, 30 points a game with Trey Lance and weaker receivers, in my opinion. Like, they're not having Brandon Ayuk. Debo Samuel still wasn't who Debo Samuel really is. So I think he'll be fine.
All right. I love the optimism, my man.